Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out at lunchtime today. Lots of new faces here from across Canada. I'm just going to do a quick introduction to YYC Dev and do some introductions. So Daniel's in chat there. If you guys have any questions about how the panel is going to work, or you have any questions for the panelists, just reach out to him and he'll be happy to help you. Oh, YYC Dev is for the technical crowd from any background. We're a language and framework agnostic collaborative community project. It's for designers and developers or people with really unique job titles who want to come and get inspired by all the really fascinating things that exist in the tech world. Here, there are no JavaScript versus Ruby devs, front-end versus back-end devs, junior or senior devs. We're all just a bunch of nerds who want to talk about the things that we love most. We want you to leave inspired, connected, and brimming with excitement for your craft, or perhaps to share some wisdom with us. There's always an open invitation to come speak. Whether it's your first speaking engagement or a deep technical dive, we hope to share the stage with you. Before we get started with the panel, I wanted to introduce Jason from ITIQ. Just going to pull him in to say a few words.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Jason Hamilton. I'm the account manager for ITIQ Tech Recruiters in our Calgary branch. We like to what we do is we focus on the IT specialization compared to some other agencies. So we really like working on the technical side of projects and really connect with those individuals like yourselves in the development space. We're always looking to connect with individuals, as well as if you have any questions on your resume, LinkedIn tips, or an interview prep that you want to brainstorm with me, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or even want to hear about any of the opportunities we have. I'm just a click away. Thank you so much, Serene, for bringing me to the chat.
Thanks, Jason. All right, so we decided to host this panel to answer some of the questions that the newer people in the software field have been asking us. And I'm hoping that this space will give you some clarity and help you to network with people who can maybe get you to where you want to be. So, David, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Serene. Hello, everyone. My name is David Gluesman. I am a human being that just happens to do a lot of work in the tech industry and specifically product. I've been working on internet-related technologies since about 1996, which starts to date me. The gray hair kind of shows for that. But really passionate about product development. And most recently, in the past 10 years or so, I've actually been working in trying to push forward new tech and products in the alcohol space, having founded Wine Collective here in Calgary and BlackSquare as a co-founder there as well. And now most recently working for as the CEO for Folly Enterprises, which is the merger of Global Wine Database and Wine Folly. And that's me.
Hello, I'm Kevin. I am the founder of Paradem Consulting. We are a software development consultancy here in Calgary. We work on all sorts of products. We don't have a particular industry or niche. We try to focus on working with clients as the expert and then implementing their idea and ensuring that we're able to move forward with that. I have a ridiculously long time of in the industry as well. I started in 1998 though, so not 1996. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome, great to have you here. Ian.
Hi. Hey everyone, my name is Ian Sutherland. I'm the backend engineering lead at Neo Financial. If you don't know about Neo, we're building digital banking products for Canadians. In addition to working at Neo, I'm also the maintainer of Create React app and a member of the Node.js team.
Awesome, that's great. We have a lot of questions on our list, so I think let's get to it. So, question I frequently get asked, and let's throw this over to Ian. What type of questions are likely to be asked in an interview, and what type of things should somebody know inside and out for the coding part of an interview?
Yeah, good question. I would say something that I see missing sometimes that I think is a really key skill in a technical interview is being able to talk at sort of a few different levels of detail about a project or product that you worked on in the past. So something like give me a summary at the beginning. Like, what is the product? What does it do? What was the feature you were building? And then be ready to kind of like drill down to like, okay, the front end part of that was implemented with this framework and this language. It was talking to, a backend service written in this language over this kind of an API, and then be prepared to really drill down into those things when follow-up questions come up. I think being able to do that really succinctly is a very important skill, and something that I'm definitely going to ask about in an interview.
David, anything to add there?
Sure. I guess I'll chime in and say, actually, I'm not a huge fan of like super technical interviews, even if it is a technical job. I actually kind of despise like take-home assignment work for devs. I'm really keen on trying to understand how you think. How do you solve problems? Where do you get blocked? Are you someone who gets completely stonewalled by a problem and then just gives up? Or are you someone who's going to be resilient and really push through? So trying to, have a fairly candid conversation with even like the most technical of hire to understand like, hey, how do you solve problems? And explain me your thought process and like your theories, and do you have a resource that you use online? Do you have a network of people you can reach out to? It's way, way bigger than just raw technical skill.
Is there some way people can prepare for those questions?
Well, I think a big part of that lies in with experience, which I know, like if you're fresh out of school or in school, you're going, well, thanks. Now you got me in the cycle of I can't get a job because I don't have experience, that classic conundrum. But really, each individual, I think, has the opportunity to go out and play with technology and be a part of any sort of community they want, whether it's open source or working with a friend to create something lighthearted and fun. There's tons of opportunities at close to zero cost outside of your time to like go and try and play in the industry and make cool stuff. And you're going to learn a ton from that. And I love, personally, being able to talk about pet projects or personal projects from people during interviews. Be like, hey, why did you do that? Like, tell me the human factor of why you're building something. It's really powerful for me anyway. It allows me to understand who you are as a person.
Awesome. Kevin, I think this next one's for you. Is there any advantage to getting or maintaining your professional engineer designation as a software engineer? Is it something that employers value?
That's a great question. I'm not probably the best person to answer this. I don't think so. Okay, let me step back a second. I don't think that there's a huge value in having your professional engineering certification for the software development industry in the state that it is now. I think at some point I would actually really like it to be important and make it have it being of value, because there's so much going on in our industry right now with the differences in level of quality or expectation of what people are expected to have. You can go all the way from I've never done this before, but I'm going to try to build a rocket ship, to I've done my PEng and I have an engineering degree in software engineering, all applying for the same job. And so at this point, I don't think it's something that very many organizations are looking for. I imagine if you're applying to an engineering firm, then yeah, that's gonna be important. But if you're applying to the normal software development shop, then just some good experience, as David was mentioning, with doing your own thing or having some previous experience is probably all you're going to need. And to be totally honest, it's really hard to get your PEng in a software development area, because not many of us are actually engineers. to be able to do that work for you. And so we had one developer who worked for us for a while who was focusing on trying to do that and eventually moved organizations because he wanted his PEng, not because he felt he needed it. He just felt he wanted the credential. So he had to go work for some engineers.
David or Ian, any opinions on that?
I mean, I agree with what Kevin is saying. Like, I think there are probably a couple sort of jobs or fields where having that designation is important, but I would say for the vast majority, it's not. And I also agree, I would love it if there was some kind of a certification or something for software engineers. I don't think that should be what the current system is. It is very hard to get, and I feel like it doesn't really fit the industry very well. But I would love it if there was something like that for our field.
I'll just chime in with a brief comment on it. I've never seen it be a requirement with anyone that I even know. Granted, if you're building bridges, you probably need one.
Absolutely.
Let alone want one. You probably need it. But software is all metaphorical bridges, and thus I think certification, just generally speaking on like the broad strokes of it, is actually very challenged from, you know, what Kevin and Ian are talking about. Like the desire to have that, I think will always be behind, because tech is just moving at such a lightning fast pace that it's just like the schools and certifications are always behind. They just are. So
yeah, having a certification like that was actually relevant to the current state of technology would be extremely challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. However, and just to make the one point is that if you have your PEng and you have the training of an engineer, that is valuable, right? In the software space. So, you know, don't, I wouldn't take it as a thing like, oh, I shouldn't get my engineering degree because, you know, it's not going to be valuable. The education is definitely valuable. I just don't think the PEng certification part of it is something that anybody is looking for and things like that.
All right. David, I think let's toss this one over to you. So someone asked, is it possible to get into part-time contract work as a junior? And if so, what kind of skills are necessary to succeed given the large overlaps between product design and development?
sure, yes, that's the short answer. The slightly longer answer is that it's so hyper dependent on the individual. And I think the key piece here is the dependability factor. Can you get things done? And moreover, can you get things done without having to have someone else like triple check your work or potentially redo your work is a major component. But again, this is such an individualistic type thing, and dare I say a bit entrepreneurial in nature. Like if you're trying to be junior, or if you are junior because you don't have a ton of experience, your work essentially proves itself out, right? So if you can start building a reputation, doing some contracts, you will be in high demand very quickly if you can essentially start building those relationships and prove that you're actually worth hiring. So again, it's a little bit of that, I can't get a job because I don't have experience type thing, but there's always opportunity to break out. It's just like getting that first one is your hardest. And then after that, it's really a ton of reputation is what kind of drives that forward.
What do you think, Kevin? You hire some juniors.
Being a junior in software isn't necessarily the hard part of doing the freelancing work. The freelancing work, you have to be communicative, you have to be clear. I think David's points of being reliable are super important. You can, if you know a space, even if it's niche, or say you're doing starting in just web dev, doing websites for people, definitely, you know, you're junior, you can start with that sort of a thing. But if you don't have those communication skills and you don't have that entrepreneurial aspect, yeah, you're not going to get very far. And being a junior at a large company, or even a small company like Paradem, you get exposed to a lot more background knowledge and things like that without having to be the entrepreneur. So again, I think default to David's answer, it depends on the person. If you think that you're a business person and you want tech to be your business, give it a shot. the worst it's going to do is you're going to fail and learn a ton while you're doing it.
What do you think, Ian? Or what technologies do you think juniors would have the best opportunities with right now?
That's a good question. I was going to say, I think an important skill to have if you do want to try this is being able to see a project through to completion. I think we've all, started various side projects, and if you have, that, doing the first like 80% of the project is the easy part, but that last 20% where you're trying to deploy it and polish up all of the little pieces really is the hard part. So I'd make sure that you have that particular skill to see something all the way through like that. And yeah, in terms of technologies, like I don't know that there is a better or worse option there. I mean, it's whatever you're comfortable with, whether that's like JavaScript or Ruby on Rails or whatever, whatever you can work efficiently with, and whatever I guess the demand is there for. I mean, obviously JavaScript's a popular choice these days just because it's so ubiquitous, but I think there's opportunity with other technologies as well.
Awesome. So if you were hiring somebody with largely freelance experience, what would stand out as positive and negative for those candidates? David?
I think the only real negatives is really dependent. If you are a freelancer, are you trying to gain full-time employment, or are you just freelancing? Are you a gun for hire? And being perfectly candid about it, there are really a small group of talented, reliable freelancers, the gun for hires, that I've ever interacted with ever in like 20 years, easy. I can look at that and be like, on one hand, that's how many I've worked with that are reliable long-term. So I think that's maybe like you can carve out either side, but I think kind of dependent again on that whole entrepreneurial thing. Like to be a contractor, you have to be multifaceted in regards to like, how do you run your business? How do you carve out your time? How are you dependable and reliable? How do you have quality, et cetera, et cetera? Like all those things. Like you can make a truckload of cash if you're motivated by cash as a freelancer. Sky's the limit. You could net hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, easy. Maybe not easy, but you can get there. But if that's not your jam and you're trying to become an employee because you want the reliability, maybe less stress, or you want to work with a team for a long-term vision, it requires a slightly different mindset, of which people have crossed that chasm successfully, at least in my realm that I've seen.
Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I would say, I agree with David. And then also something that I would like to see if someone is coming from a freelancing background is maybe some kind of relationship, like a longer term relationship with a client that kind of indicates to me that you've done good work for them and they came back to you and you continued that relationship versus, just a whole bunch of tiny one-off projects. I mean, that's not to say that's necessarily a bad thing, but I would feel more comfortable seeing that sort of longer term engagement.
Awesome. So we've done some work with Bow Valley College on their capstone projects, and we get these questions from their students all the time about the technologies they're learning in school versus what is actually used in industry. And I frequently have these try to talk to them about how the tech world is it's continuously evolving. The languages that we all started our careers out with are not the ones that we're using now. What kind of advice would you give to them about the skills they're learning in school versus those that are applicable in real life? Kevin.
My advice whenever I'm asked that question is, the technology doesn't matter as much as the understanding of how things fit together. So whether you're programming in .NET, whether you're programming in TypeScript, whether you're programming in Ruby, it doesn't matter if you can take from your education the fact that computers need instruction. We need to learn how to give them that instruction. We need to understand the people who are telling us what the computer needs to do, and we need to be able to communicate. After that, languages are languages. It's a couple of weeks of working to understand a syntax, and you're off to the races. For the 80%, you want to be really, really good in a language and really push it to its levels, or work on the core team of Node.js, then you better really understand the core of that language and understand what's going on there. But for the day-to-day work, you can get by as long as you understand those principles that they're hopefully teaching you in school, which is how to architect software, how to put it together, what parts do you need to work on. Don't open the 2 GB file all into memory if you don't know how much memory you have. That sort of stuff.
So Ian, building on that, what would some of those core foundational topics be?
I would say, I think Kevin kind of touched on some of it there. I would say just understanding like the higher level pieces of a system and how they kind of connect together, being able to, and then to drill down from that, like, when you click on this button in this React app, like what happens after that? And just understanding, sort of what are the lower layers there, and being curious about learning what happens, when you do that, or what happens when this API request hits the service. What are the next like layers in that application? And those, I think, are you don't have to be working on a React app or a Node backend or whatever. I think those are kinds of skills, just understanding what is going on behind the scenes and digging into that. I think you can apply across a variety of languages and frameworks and tools.
So I'm hearing basics of HTTP, how APIs work, and general architecture, and some business analysis and project management. That's what I think Kevin said. Do you have anything to add to that, David?
Yeah, I agree with what Kevin and Ian are talking about for sure. I think maybe on like a slightly broader strokes is that I think with technology, the big challenge that exists is that you need to know a lot about a lot of things. Especially, we'll speak web and maybe like even app development. Is that if you don't know anything about how infrastructure works, you should probably start reading up or playing in that space, because infrastructure is such a base level thing to understand how applications work. So like Kevin's example about, hey, do you want to, put 2 gigs of something into memory? It's like, well, why does that matter? Why not? Like, there's lots of RAM in my computer. Like, what's the big deal? So like being able to be aware of like the grander scheme of things, even if we pivot and talk a little bit about like, say, product development and understanding how usability and UI and UX all kind of work together, that has a really strong effect in regards to like application development. But if you've never written any sort of front end code, let's talk web again, like, HTTP or HTTP. Yes, via HTTP, HTML, CSS, JS. Like if you've never played with that stack, how can you actually build applications without having at least some awareness of how it is? You don't have to be a designer or a front end person per se, but having that knowledge is going to allow you to be probably a stronger developer. And I think this comes full circle, and I'll end it at this, is that again, when I'm trying to hire people I want to work with, it's really important to understand how that person learns. Like, how do you learn? How do you continuously improve yourself? Because like you cannot sit still. Like getting your degree or whatever sort of certification you're getting through any sort of institution, that's the beginning, and it never ends. And if that's something that you're just like, that sounds like a lot of work, then this is probably not the field for you, because this stuff is constantly changing all the time.
It's true. There's always something new. Oh, yeah, I get questions all the time about coding challenges, and I think we touched on this a little bit before about the value of coding tests as part of the interview process. But there's still lots of companies that are using it. Do you have any suggestions on how to prepare for those, Ian?
So I'm personally not a huge fan of these kinds of of coding tests either. I would say if you are wanting to prepare for one, I mean, the best way to prepare is just practice, right? There are lots of free sites and resources out there with all kinds of coding challenges that you can try and practice on in whatever language you're comfortable in, or in whatever language you might be, the company you're interviewing for might be using. But yeah, like I said, in general, I'm not a huge believer in those kinds of tests. I would say anytime that I've used them in the past, I'm more trying to get a sense of like the person's problem solving abilities versus like, can you solve this problem in 5 minutes? Which is, I know there's some like competitive coding challenges that are like speed based, and I really don't see the point of those. But yeah, for me, if I were looking at someone's code from one of those kinds of things, I'm more interested in seeing how did they choose to solve this problem, because there's a variety of ways to solve any problem, pretty much always. So I just kind of want to see, and it is to kind of get just a little bit of insight into their thought process and their problem solving process, and see, yeah, what they came up with.
So when you're doing those things, do you do like a take-home test, or is it more of a pair programming session, or what?
Well, so we don't really do those at Neo. When I have done them in the past at other companies, it was more of a take-home kind of thing. We tried to keep it as short as possible. Like, I think it's also not very respectful of a candidate to give them like an 8-hour take-home coding test. So we always tried to keep them like, you should be able to do this within an hour. But yeah, more of a take-home versus a pair programming.
Yeah. Kevin, what do you guys do at Paradem?
So again, with the rest of the camp here, I'm not a big fan of those you're gonna make you write bubble sort on the board or something like that type of challenges. Mainly because I've never been very good at them myself. So why would I inflict them on candidates that I'm trying to hire? What we do is, in our interview process, is we do a sort of just a conversation. We get to understand a little bit more about what's going on, try to suss out their problem solving. And then if we get down to the final round of our candidacy, since we're a consultancy and we work with clients directly a lot and we change topics a lot, we give the candidate a take-home test, but we pay them for it. So we give them a week. If they're not employed currently, like say just out of school or in between jobs or something like that, we give them a week. They get 5 days. They're invited to our Slack channel and they're told that this is the job that you've been given. We're hiring you to do a particular job, and here's the really bad requirements document that you could get from your client in order to do it. We are fully open for you to ask questions, bring ideas, everything like that. But this is a job that you've been hired to do. Let's see how you do it. And if they are employed currently, we give them 2 weeks, because obviously we can't expect them to carve out the time, and we pay them a market rate. I think junior position, we give $1,000. And if you're more of the senior level, because we're expecting a little more out of you, we'll pay around $1,500 for the week's worth of work, the 5 days worth of work. So it's not like we're not giving them $100 or something like that. Like, this is a serious thing. You're expected to take it serious, and your outcome of it will decide whether you get the job or not. And even if they're not familiar with the technology stack that we're using, we just throw it to them and say, get as far as you can, be as open and communicative as you can, and then we'll look over your code at the end and assess you on different criteria. Like, did you ask questions? Did you communicate? Did you give updates as you were going through? Because a lot of people just disappear for the week and be like, what happened to you, right? That's not good for when you're working with clients, right? You need to be open and communicative and things like that. Your client will think that you've quit, and things like that. So it's worked really well for us to help suss out that part of the interview where you could be really good in a conversation, but when actually you go to work, you're not someone that we're necessarily interested in working with.
It's cool. It's kind of like a contract to hire type
Really
scenario.
short, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. David, why do companies seem to only hire senior developers?
Because they're cheaper.
Tell me more about that.
So, boy, okay, where to start? So I actually genuinely mean that senior staff are genuinely cheaper, like pure cash outlay time-wise, than junior developers. Not all, grossly generalizing here, but a junior dev, again, very much dependent on the candidate, requires a company to have enough float of resources to teach is generally how it works. So if you're working for like a super scrappy startup and there's one dev, they're probably not going to hire another junior dev to join that like senior dev, because that senior dev is responsible for everything. Like the super full stack ninja guy, he's probably doing that. Now, if you're working for a company that has hundreds of devs, they probably can float in a decent amount of juniors. But the thing is, when hiring juniors, you need to, as a company, have enough resources to essentially invest in juniors. And then the last thing I'll mention too, if you're junior, you don't have a lot of experience, the thing that can sometimes be painful as a owner of a company or someone who runs a company or leads is that you're investing, the company's investing in you as a junior if we do bring you on board. Now, unfortunately, I've seen this happen so many times I can't even count, that, you know, it is what it is. People move around, right? And one of the easiest ways to increase your salary, like it or not, is to jump, to change jobs, right? Or move, which is why so many people are like, man, Calgary wages aren't competitive. I want to get paid what they get paid in San Francisco. It's like, okay, but you realize there's a cost difference of living in San Francisco than there is in Calgary. Maybe we can come back to that later. But yeah, so anyway, that's the long and short of it, is that if we can hire juniors, I love working with new people. I love mentoring and teaching people for sure. However, it really depends on the time and place of the company.
What do you think, Ian? I'd like to hear also more about what we can do as a city and as a community to foster more mentorship of junior developers, or encourage companies maybe or provide them the resources that they would need to be able to provide that kind of training.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think, I mean, I agree with David's points. There is definitely a cost to bringing on junior developers. However, I think there are some significant advantages as well. They don't have any bad habits yet from previous work experience. And you can really train them in the technologies and the development sort of methodologies that your company uses, and really, you know, focus them on that. And as they sort of like level up, they're very much ingrained in your like culture and the way that your company works. So I think there's a lot of advantage to that, which is maybe something that people don't consider. I think it's also better, like your senior engineers will learn more and they will be better engineers from having to mentor junior engineers and do things like that. Also, like the quality of your documentation and your tools and all of those things will also improve as you're bringing on more junior people like that. But I do agree, like we've gone through this at Neo actually, where we did hire a number of junior developers, which worked out great. But then we basically decided like we can't take on any junior devs at this time because now we need to, we sort of have that imbalance that David was talking about. So now we need to focus on bringing on some more like intermediate and senior people. And I think we're kind of just getting to a point again where we've done that over the last few months. And so we probably will start bringing on some more junior people now. But yeah, you do definitely have to balance it.
Is there like a sweet spot ratio, or can we even put such an objective metric on it?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think, I think you need at least one senior person for every 2 juniors, probably. Like I think expecting a senior person to mentor, 3 or 4 more junior devs at once, unless you want to make that basically their entire job, which is an option. Otherwise, yeah, I think realistically, like 1 or 2 is probably, yeah.
Okay. Kevin, I wanted to chat with you about what you guys do over at Paradem. I guess I'm kind of cheating because I have been involved in that process, but what do you provide to your junior developers to kind of guarantee or help with their success in your team?
Yeah, so we're a fully remote company. So a lot of the stuff we have to do is distance education. So one of the things that we did in our most recent project, which is what Syrian's referring to as cheating, is we were. Let me step back one more thing. So I believe of hiring juniors because I can't find seniors that are available, right? If in Calgary area or even nationwide, getting a senior developer means you need to find someone in their career where they're ready to be dislodged. Like if I wanted to hire Ian, he better be super unhappy with Neo because it sounds like a cool place to work. So it's no way that I'm going to get him out if he's cash motivated without spending a lot of money, right? And so I look at it as, there's lots of juniors in the world, and so Paradem is looking to see how we can bring on those junior developers and level them up as fast as possible. Because again, we're a consultancy, so we need to deliver to our clients. We're not a product company or something like that. So about a year ago, we were in a situation where 2 of our senior developers got dislodged from Paradem Consulting and were taken off probably due to stacks of cash to US-based or local startups in Calgary. And so I was in a need to hire new software developers. And so I went with hiring 2 new juniors. And we went through our hiring process, as we were mentioning, but Paradem was offset. We had just lost 2 of our senior developers. All the other seniors were engaged in project work. So I reached out to Syrian to bring an actual mentorship to those 2 junior devs. And basically, as Ian was saying, make one senior developer's job the mentoring of 2 other senior developers. And so Syrian wasn't responsible for delivering any of the products or features for the application, but she was there and making sure that they weren't, coding themselves into a corner or falling off a cliff or something like that. And that goes to Paradem's, center. Like we offer education, right? That was the most aggressive education we've offered. Usually it's Pragmatic Studios or Westboss or Weesboss or whatever his name is, or something like that. Training courses, in order to get them through it, and then we work on the job training sort of a thing. But at the point there, we didn't have anybody. I had a brand new project that we needed to deliver, and I had no one to mentor it. So we brought in a mentor. I felt that was a really good way of looking at it. And so if there's other businesses out there interested in that sort of a thing, I would recommend it. To bring on someone who is a senior engineer and basically hire them as a freelancer to operate and help me with that mentorship as you're going through. But that was the greatest level of education we put on to our juniors before.
Go for it, David.
I just wanted to chime in with one last note about just junior developers and whatnot to kind of help spin on like the positive light of juniors. I think I have a very strong desire to work with younger people. There's a huge advantage to having fresh faces and fresh ideas and a new way of thinking join your company that you actually can't get from seniors, to echo what Ian was saying. I think the thing that drives me a little bit crazy in today's world is titles are kind of meaningless. That's how I feel about it. If you're a junior dev and if you're calling yourself a junior dev, okay, but at the same point in time, are you someone who's driven, can learn quickly, is super eager? Then I want to work with you. It's highly likely I want to work with you. But if you're just hey, can I have a job so you can teach me how to do stuff? It's that's I'm being kind of ridiculous in how I'm phrasing it, but that's not someone I'm super excited to work with, just generally. So it's a bit of an attitude, but the drive factor is huge. Are you driven? Are you eager? That outweighs inexperience by far. If you're eager, we'll invest in you for sure.
Yeah, actually, I just want to quickly echo that as well. That is definitely the kind of thing. If you're applying as a junior developer, I'm much less concerned with your tech skills or what languages or technologies you learn. I want to know, do you have a great attitude? Are you passionate about software and software development and learning and improving your skills? Those are the things to me when I'm interviewing a junior that really stand out to me.
Definitely agree. I've hired a few juniors this year, and that drive and humility and desire to learn have definitely been the traits that have made them stand out. All right, on to the next question. Job postings often ask for many skill sets. How can juniors help overcome experience gaps if they don't meet the longer requirements list on a posting? Ian, since you're already...
I mean, that's a good question. Sometimes there's maybe no way around those things, but I would say if it's a junior position, the company hopefully is flexible on those things, and they are kind of like we were just saying, looking for some different skills in lieu of that experience. I think that's a good way that I would approach that. And I mean, I think it would be kind of weird for a company to post a junior dev position that asks for 2 years of experience with this or that. So I don't know, maybe steer clear of those kinds of things. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a very good answer, but
You need 15 years of React experience.
right. Yeah, that's that's a more senior job, but yeah, React hasn't even existed for that long. So
Exactly.
yeah, I would say take those things with kind of a grain of salt. If you think you in general meet the requirements, then I would say just go for it.
David, for junior role applicants with no experience in software development, what kinds of projects would stand out the most in a portfolio?
Something that you can talk about with some passion, I think is probably the easiest one. So, and that could be like almost anything. Like you're like, oh, I wanted to make this to-do list thing. Or if you want to be super on trend right now, I'd be like, well, I decided to play the stock market and wrote like this fun application which tells you when GME is like green or red. Like there's no shortage of like small projects that like maybe don't require a ton of time or maybe not even that complex. But if you can come to the table and go, there's a problem, I want to try and solve it, and here's how I did it. Awesome. That's such a great way for an employer to have a better understanding of who you are, how you think, are you driven? And then it opens up all this discussion. Like, what were some problems that you hit? How did you solve it? How long did it take you? How did you decide when it was done? Did you build in some testing? Like, it just goes and goes and goes. And I think, I've mentioned this before, but like if you're not working or if you've never worked on your own sort of like pet project from 0 to live, which I think we've brought up a little bit, you should. It's fun. And also it's a great way for you to get work. Like, here's the thing, check it out. You want to see the source code of it because you're running a code challenge? Hey, actually, I don't have time to do your code thing, but if you want to go take a look at my source code on GitHub, by all means, check it out. And you can see how I write, how I think, how I document, how easy my code is to read or not. Like you can just learn so much. And then to conclude that, for me, when hiring, if you make my job easy, then it's going to be a lot easier for me to be convinced to hire you too, right? So like you have a lot of power coming into an interview. But at the same point in time, as you interview from like the cultural standpoint, where we're talking like, hey, show all this experience, you have to be self-selective in terms of the companies you want to work for too, right? Like it is two ways.
Yeah, I really like that because I think that could be in place of a coding test as well, right? It would show all of your experience, kind of your drive, things that you're interested in. And it says a lot about your personality and desire to learn.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would actually rather see that than the coding test, because that shows that you're motivated to do something on your own and to learn on your own. I also always tell people, you don't have to come up with a great idea for a side project. You don't have to invent some new product or business or something like that. If you can't think of something, excuse me, do something funny or dumb or silly, like just anything that shows that you've come up with an idea and seen that problem through to completion.
Awesome. So for brand new juniors in software development coming out of boot camps or just have no experience in software development, would you suggest that they apply to roles in startups or larger companies, or does it matter? Kevin?
I think it goes back to the individual of what they're looking for. a lot of startups aren't going to be able to support them in the way that a person's fresh out of a boot camp or something like that is going to need to be supported to learn, right? So you're going to need to do that yourself, right? I know that we've talked a lot about working on side projects and things like that, and I want to make sure that everyone, who's listening in doesn't freak out and say like, well, I need to be that developer who's always sitting at home and coding and everything like that. Like Ian was saying, or do something funny, do something fun. Don't have to spend a lot of time on it. Or if you can use your final project out of your schooling, you can use that to leverage into your sort of portfolio. But if you're applying to a startup, that is something you're going to need to have, because it's likely that startup has that culture baked into it, right? Most startups are scrappy. There's very few startups, if they're at their initial level where they're sitting on $30-40 million of funding. And if you're sitting on $30 or $40 million of funding, I hesitate to call you a startup. There's got to be another middle of the road, term for that. Not quite successful business, because maybe you haven't found market fit yet, but also you're not quite a startup. You're sitting on stacks of cash. And so if I was counseling a junior developer, I would say, if you're looking for a position where you can go in, learn, and be, not super stressed out, apply at the larger organizations. Go for the Shopifys. Go for those large organizations that probably have some sort of structure that they can support them. However, if you're really interested in what startup life is like, you're up for the fast pace, you want to continually learn, then apply for those ones. So it's really down to that individual level. What level of crazy are you looking for?
So are you saying that they should look for a company, regardless of the size, that has the capacity for mentorship?
Yeah. To echo what David mentioned, it's a two-way street. Find the company that you want to work for, right? And then go after them. Don't just be like, okay, I'm going to send my resume around to every single web dev job on Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever you're looking for a job. Look around, see like, oh hey, Neo's doing some really cool stuff, or hey, I watched that presentation. David was talking about some neat stuff. I want to reach out and look to them, especially if you're a junior, because if you show that initiative, it's possible that the organization might not have an opening for a junior, but you showed that initiative, and they might be able, hey, let's talk with this fellow, or this what's the gender neutral term for fellow? Anyway, fellows, this person, this applicant, and see what they have, and they might be able to open up a position. I know that I would do that if I was reached out by the right candidate. I was like, well, I don't really have the space, but you showed the initiative, your work is interesting, you've got that character. Let's see what we can do. And maybe it's a 6-month contract that I bring them on for. I can't guarantee a long-term position, but I can bring them on for a 6-month contract because I know I've got work for them, and things like that. And then they know that they're working for somewhere that they want to. Research those companies, because people dream, oh, I want the job at Google, or I want the job at Amazon. You probably don't. Depending on what part it is, right? You want one of the jobs at the smaller companies, and so look around and see what's available. Do that research.
All right, David, I think this next question you might be able to help answer. So somebody had asked in chat, it's a follow-up on the junior versus senior costs. And I'm going to paraphrase a bit. I think what they're trying to ask is, for junior developers who are pivoting from other industries, is there value from what they've learned in their previous jobs?
Absolutely.
Like, would you like, in terms of business domain, or what would you be looking for them to transfer from other careers?
So let me try and answer that by explaining a little bit of what it's like to work for us for a second, and maybe that will best translate in regards to just like how things work. So for us, like, we have 3 cultural pillars at Folly, which is communication, trust, and respect. Those 3 things, and you can't not do one of those. Like, it's like this triangle of success and triangle of culture and respect and communication for us. So if you've been in the workplace and you come from like a previous realm, if you're really good at communicating, for example, that's super valuable. And it's actually not something people talk about very much, I find, in like the tech world. Because like I think we've again mentioned it, like all of us in some capacity, going, hey, the way that you communicate or write code or ask questions is a critical function. It just is. Because if you're just like, hey, I'm going to go write this application. Let's say like some project comes in. It's like I've mentioned this in our Slack community before. It's like, please build me a bridge. And if you're someone who goes, awesome, I'm going to build you a bridge, and you're like, see you later, and you go off for like a couple months or something, and you build this amazing bridge that can withstand like thousands or tens of thousands of cars per hour to go over that bridge. But then the person who assigned you this task is like, I actually need this bridge for ants to cross over this tiny little pond. You're like, oh, I should have asked more questions. So the hopes is that if you're translating skills from a different profession, hopefully you've developed some like inter-office, interdisciplinary type communication skills and know how to potentially document or deal with different personality types and stuff like that. So like, you could construe that as just being general maturity, sure. But if you're coming from a different job and you're like, hey, I really want to work with tech stuff, it's like more likely than not, you're going to be bringing more value to the table than, someone who may not have that level of maturity. So anyway, that's a really long-winded answer. You're welcome.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. Ian, did you have anything to add to that?
I 100% agree that like any kind of previous like professional experience or work experience where you've developed those sorts of communication skills, definitely an asset. And then I would say if you're trying to get into tech, I used to be a mentor at Lighthouse Labs. I definitely noticed that people that had some kind of previous technical background did seem to generally do better in moving into the technical world. That's not to say, it's not, I don't want that to be like a blanket statement to say that if you don't come from a technical background, you can't succeed. I just think that's an asset to have, and it maybe just gives you a little bit of a leg up or a little bit of a head start.
There's one question that's building on top of the comments about the portfolio projects. Are there any specific areas that people should pay attention to on their portfolio, like the design of the application? Or Kevin, what do you think?
I'm not sure. It depends on what you're looking for. I was going to answer the question with your portfolio project should be something that you enjoy, right? It should be something that's fun. If you're really into stocks, like David's example, build a stock ticker. If you're really into,
I think it doesn't need to be pretty.
Yeah, exactly. I say like if you're really into art, then make it pretty, right? Because you're going to use it to show off that piece of yourself that's valuable. For me, if I was back 20 years ago trying to do this, I would not have been able to make it pretty, right? Everything that I did was black and white in boxes, but it was well architected, it was well designed, you could use it and things like that. Because it's not my strength. I hire people to make things pretty. I don't make things pretty. So the answer to the question, quick, no, I don't think it needs to be pretty. If you're going to go into an agency that's all focused on front-end design and delivering websites and things like that, then you should probably deliver something that shows that. And so, yes, it should be pretty. But in the general case, I don't think it needs to be pretty. I think it needs to be functional, and you need to be able to talk about it backwards and forwards, and things like that. But that being said, pretty things are fun to build. So, maybe make a game or, something like that.
I think there has been some frustration because you're building a portfolio project and your skills are primarily in the back end. How do you show those skills if your UI skills aren't great? Yeah, go for it.
There's never been a better time to be alive to hack and slash your way through making stuff pretty. And, I think the part of the test there is how resourceful are you? Like the new hotness of front end right now, at least from my world, has been Tailwind. right? So it's like, hey, have you played with Tailwind? Have you looked at Tailwind? Do you know what Tailwind is? Go play around with that. If you're not front end focused or a pretty maker of things, go leverage something out there that can actually do that heavy lifting for you. And you know what? Lean into it when you present it. Be like, hey, I don't pretend to have front end skills in this example, but I was resourceful enough to go and try and leverage someone else's work, open source, whatever it might be, or I bought a theme and then I plugged it all together. Awesome. Awesome. You're resourceful. Fantastic. It goes so far. So, there are walls, but it's 2021. Holy moly. There's so many ways around those walls right now. It's incredible. I wish I grew up in this time. Woo, it'd be fun. Super fun.
Yeah, I was actually going to make the exact same point. There's so many options now. Tailwind, Bootstrap, Material UI. There's an endless list of options here for making things look at least presentable. So yeah, definitely just leverage one of those if that's not your strong suit.
Yeah, Tailwind's great. There are Tailwind components as well that you can basically just copy and paste into React components, or that you just customize to whatever you want. And that's definitely what I'd recommend to them as well. So that's great. We're running out of time here. So did you guys want to, let's go through the three of you and do some closing statements. I'd love to hear with some advice you can give to the junior devs and the students that are in the group about maybe the future of the tech community in Calgary. And I hope to close on a positive note. So David, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Let me lean more into the resourcefulness thing a little bit here as a conclusion, is that if you're looking for employment or looking to network, it's never been easier. Honestly, like, you can join these Slack communities, which are niche. They're, there's the Calgary one, there's these communities all over the place for like broad or very specific things. You just got to like poke around and try and join them, and you can be a fly on the wall and just listen and see what's up. But moreover, start getting involved in conversations, start asking questions. And I think you'll be really surprised at people that are willing to actually join in and kind of give you some either feedback or a helping hand. And the last thing I'll mention too, if there is a company that you're super enamored with, and you're really interested in, don't just apply for a job. Try and talk to some people that already work there. Again, it's never been easier. LinkedIn, you can go poke around and literally just try and pitch yourself. Be like, hey, I'm a really big fan of your product or your team or something. I'd love to be able to talk to someone about a little bit more of like, if there's an opportunity to do whatever it might be. Just communicate, get out there, do stuff. I think you'd be really, really surprised at how much the world will welcome you to continue a conversation and move forward with your career.
Thanks, David. Kevin, did you want to go next?
I wanted to take a stab at the technology in Calgary. I've been really excited watching the technology scene, for lack of a better word, grow in Calgary. Being an Albertan, so as I was born, Calgary's always been oil. It's always just been the way that it is. But seeing all of the technology companies over the last, say, 10 years that are starting to come out of the Calgary area, that's really exciting. And like Dave was saying, it's so easy now in 2021, especially now that we've had the year of remote, for everyone to get connected, to see what's going on. You don't need to know where the next greatest meetup is or something like that, or have to figure out how to get to it. It's online. These Slack communities are hosting online forums like this one on a regular basis for you to be connected, not in a we say you listen forum like this one, which have their value, but also in like roundtables that you can join and talk in and things like that. Just get out there. It used to be the time of old of the IRC. You'd get on the channel, the project you were really interested to, and stuff like that. That's so much easier now. You don't need to know the esoteric parts of IRC or be in the know to get invited. You just find the community, get into it and learn about it.
All right, Ian, take us home.
Yeah, I just want to echo kind of what Kevin was saying there. And also this goes beyond just local communities. It's a great time right now. basically all conferences are online and most of them are free. So take advantage of that. That's a huge resource that we have right now. And then just to touch on the point of technology in Calgary, I totally agree. I've been in Calgary my whole life, been in technology in Calgary for a long time. I think there's never been a more exciting time for tech in Calgary. I'm a little bit biased, but I think like a company like Neo is a great example. We're a consumer product company. We're VC funded. We have over 200 employees just in the last 2 years. We're hiring like crazy, growing like crazy. And there are other companies like that out there as well in Calgary. So I think there's never been a better time, I think, to be in tech in Calgary.
I wanted to thank all our panelists today for joining us. We threw it together pretty last minute, so I really appreciate them taking time out of their day to help answer questions for the community. And just a final reminder, YYC Dev is really committed to bringing people together from juniors to seniors and be able to answer questions, point you guys in the right direction. If you ever have any questions, please join the YYC Design and Dev Slacks. Everybody's there is really helpful and can help point you in the right direction. And I hope to see you guys again at another meetup. If you have any feedback or questions or comments, send them over to me or Daniel. If you guys are looking for a job, Jason should be in chat there somewhere. Reach out to him and he'd be happy to connect you with one of his recruiters that can help you out with whatever it is that you need. So once again, thanks to the speakers and everybody who's attended. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.